What's up guys, it is Coaster Thrills here, and for today's video, I'll be doing my full in-depth review on all the Batman the Ride clones. Even though I've not ridden the one in Canada or overseas, I would expect this review to apply to those. You can find these across almost all the Six Flags parks as Batman the Ride or Goliath, and of course there is Great White at SeaWorld San Antonio. Now, I have ridden almost all of them. They are known as very intense rides, and let me tell you, that is correct, because these coasters are very forceful in the tight space they take up, and are one of the best clones even in the world, even though there are so many of them. And plus, they also do deliver smooth rides most of the time, especially on the one at Six Flags Great America. That's actually being my favorite out of all of them, even though it was the first ever B&M invert. So as we go into the video, most importantly, before we start, if you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe for more videos on coasters often. Also, if you want to see more, make sure to follow our social media pages for updates and much more. But now that that is out of the way, let's look at these stats for these coasters. Starting out, they're 105 feet tall, obviously not the tallest, but they don't really need to be. 50 miles per hour is the top speed, as it definitely feels like you're going faster, but then they have a very solid 5 inversions, all being pretty good. Those are 2 loops, a 0G roll, and 2 corkscrews. And then finally, they have a track length of 2,700 feet long, even though it does feel like a longer ride than the track length tells. But before we go more into the coaster, let's look at some of the complaints, as there aren't really that much to this coaster, which why it'll be very quick. There really is not many at all, but the one little complaint is just maybe depends on your ride. It can be a little rough, and that's for sure not in all of them, as I would say half are glossy smooth and half, have a little roughness. But it is a minor complaint, as it's probably due to the intensity, which, like I already mentioned, these coasters are very intense, especially if you ride them at night, which I did get to do this summer at Six Flags Magic Mountain, and it was awesome. It feels like you're going, of course, way faster than you actually are, and it is so good at night, as I would also expect that with the other clones, as I got the same experience on Goliath this past November. But let's dive into the history a little, as, of course, the first one was built at Six Flags Great America in 1992 as the first ever B&M invert, and then in the 1990s, all the Six Flags parks started cloning these things to where they are today. The order followed as Great America, Great Adventure, Magic Mountain, St. Louis, over Georgia, then over Texas, and then finally Goliath, which originally opened as Batman the Ride at Six Flags New Orleans, to then be relocated to Fiesta, Texas, of course, due to Hurricane Katrina. Something that is kind of odd with these clones is that, if you have noticed in this footage, is that it is elevated from the ground, especially during those first drop and loop, and that was due to the terrain of Great America at the time. They had to make it a little elevated, and that's what they cloned. So you're going to find that with every Batman the Ride clone, which is just a cool characteristic to it. But before we get to the ride experience, I just want to rank these coasters from worst to best, and I'm only going to include the ones I have ridden. So of course I'll rank Great White and Goliath with them, because they have the exact same layout. I'll go through them pretty quickly, as there are 8 to rank. So we first have the one at St. Louis, then Great White, probably the least intense out of all of them, even though it still delivers a very enjoyable ride. Great Adventure, which is probably the most average one, then Goliath at Six Flags Fiesta, Texas, which is one of the most intense, then the most intense Batman at Six Flags over Georgia. Over Texas then has a great one at number 2 is Batman the Ride at Six Flags Magic Mountain, and finally the number 1 Batman the Ride clone is the first one, the original at Six Flags Great America, by far the most enjoyable, as also being by far the smoothest, as it is pretty glossy smooth. But let's walk up to the ride, as you see the plaza found in all of these coasters with the Batman logo, the Batmobile, and of course the music playing in the background, which always kind of feels the same with the clones, except in Great White and Goliath, of course. But you'll walk through the queue, which it actually has great views of the coaster, with some more theming as Gotham City Park. That does look pretty good, but you also go through the Gotham Public Works during the queue, which this coaster has definitely more theming than most Six Flags rides. And I can tell you, it is some pretty good theming, like I said, especially for Six Flags, but still going through the queue is like a container you're kind of stuck in it, but let me tell you, it gets hot in there, especially in the summer. But then finally, you'll get to the station where you are greeted with this very cool looking Batman sign at the top of the station. This being in his Batcave, also with his suit that for sure, like the rest of the ride, does not have any theming at all. But what do you expect? The same goes for Great White and Goliath. But you will, of course, board the station, the standard B&M invert trains that always have, those comfortable over-the-shoulder restraints, and you have to choose a row. I would probably, depends on what coaster, go for the back because it's normally more intense there, and overall, it just delivers a better ride, but the floor will drop from underneath, and you will leave the station and start to go up that lift hill. You get up it very quickly as you then go down that very standard B&M drop. It's definitely not really anything special because these drops really don't give you any airtime, and plus, it's definitely not the biggest at only 85 feet tall. But next, you'll go into that first vertical loop, the first of two, and definitely these, if you look at them, they're more shaped as a circle compared to other loops on B&Ms, which does add a little intensity to them, which is great. This ride is really split up into two parts. The first half is definitely the shortest, but more spread out. That is the drop and the first two inversions, while the second section is more of a spaghetti bowl and the track going every which direction, which is really intense. You will come into the second inversion, the ZOG roll. That is probably my favorite inversion of the ride, and it is pretty whippy as you go pretty fast through it. At least it feels like that, especially on a night ride. But then is the second vertical loop that is very similar to the first one. This coaster, overall has one word to describe it, and that was powerful. Same goes with the next element, of course, that is a turn into another turn that gives you a little bit of a break. But it will not be for long as you come into this corkscrew, like I've said. With the other parts, it is very intense, with this one also being pretty whippy into another turn that right here delivers a very good picture spot if you are standing in the queue. And plus, the turn is pretty fun as you then head into the last inversion, another corkscrew where you head into another tight turn into the brakes, ending your ride on Batman the Ride or Goliath, a Great White. Overall, these coasters are some of the best clones out there, and they deliver a very powerful and intense ride, also in being fun, as always. So, for its overall score, it will get a 7.5 out of 10, a very solid score, but this, I would kind of say it's average out of all the coasters, because one could get either, a 7 or an 8. So, what do you think of this clone? Make sure to post that in the comments below, and of course, make sure to subscribe for more videos on coasters often. And see ya!